evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink. .3 Mahoning Drive-In Radio, your old friend Virgil back once again for another exciting episode of the podcast. As you guys know, the only podcast dedicated to the love and revival of our beloved drive-in culture. Joined as always by my co-host and general manager extraordinaire, Mark. Say hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend.
We are on a high, not just because the 2025 drive-in season is coming up, but the Road Show, the 2025 Road Show has launched. An amazing success. It's been so fruitful in many ways. Mark, what are you thinking about this roadshow? It's just been the gift that keeps on giving, right?
I think it's so wonderful and glorious that we ought to think about doing it again next year.
Yeah, like we're already booking shows for next year. So today we're really excited for the episode for you guys because we have the co-hosts of the Deuce Film Series, which was launched in 2012. The Deuce Film Series, based in New York, 35 millimeter only series that celebrates classic 42nd Street theaters and that era, that sweet spot era of the Grindhouse and the Grindhouse theater experience. They're up to their 125th show now, so we're going to be teaming with them for Road Show, a screening of EQUINOX, which we're really excited about. Welcome, Joe Berger and Jeff Cashvan. Welcome, sirs.
Thank you for having us.
Woo! Hello.
So excited to have you guys. We actually just did a show, midnight screening of Demons at the Nitehawk, and got to chat it up with Jeff. And I knew right away, like, this, number one, this is going to be an amazing podcast because Jeff is a storyteller. But also that we were connecting with the right people, you know, like the passion was so on display and infectious at that show.
I had a great time.
Oh, that's what we love to hear. And it's been
great.
Just, we get up, we do a little introduction, we talk about the love of the drive-in. It's kind of an extension of what this podcast is, just shining a light or continuing to shine a light on the things that we love. But yeah, the crowd was amazing, nice packed house, so it went really well. But we're here today to talk about the Deuce Film Series, and there's so much history to talk about with you guys, but I don't know how we want to break this up, but what is the Deuce Film Series and how did it initially start?
What is the Deuce?
Oh,
what is
dear.
the Deuce?
Yeah.
The Deuce, or the 40 Deuce, is the nickname given to 42nd Street, twixt 7th and 8th Avenues, where, by its heyday, 1970s, 1980s, 12 old movie palaces, 14 screens, churning out double and triple features every day of the year. Some people think it's where movies went to die. We like to think it's perhaps where they lived the only life they could. So welcome. We are a 35 millimeter series, as you mentioned, monthly at Nitehawk Cinema. That's my little spiel I give at the top of every screening. So that's the Deuce. The Deuce is 42nd Street. It's absolutely the most notorious, famous, infamous, beloved cinema block in history. Long story short, way back in 2012, 13 years ago, there was a little video store on Bedford Street and South 3rd called Videology.
Yes.
Yep, and it had been around for about 10 years at that point, and the owners realized that the way of the VHS and Blu-ray and DVD was subsiding, so they had done what many video rental stores did at that time, and they converted to a bar and a screening room in the back. Free screenings, obviously on DVD. So a buddy of ours was doing some kind of organizing different monthly events and weekly events there, and he came to me. I had been showing a lot of movies around town for about 15 years before this and said, "Hey, Joe, do you have an idea for a series?" And I said, "I absolutely have an idea for a series." And I pitched him this exact series, the format of which we have not changed in 13 years. And really, Jeff and I, and we had a third co-host pre-COVID. The very first show we did at Videology, the three of us it was really miraculous and really special and magical. The three of us just sort of fell into our roles and created this template that has not changed at all. And it just keeps getting better and better because we don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So it's like, we do this very specific thing. We have this very specific way of rolling out a show. and we haven't changed it at all. It only gets better. But the point is, it's really not so much looking at film history. Like, it's not the history of the film in question or the production history of the film in question. It's really the history of theater going, movie going, and the history of seeing movies. It's really great to kind of orbit around the Deuce, but two things. We go off the Deuce a lot. So we'll take you to a movie palace on Broadway and 49th, or we'll take you downtown to the Waverly Theater. So we will go off the Deuce and do theater histories, pretty much New York City centric. But also, I mean, we'll start from the 19 teens when these palaces began showing movies. It's not just Grindhouse, and that's been a big point that Jeff is trying to make in the curation of the titles.
Spreading the wings a bit away from just the 70s, 80s Grindhouse era.
Absolutely, because the block has a history that dates back to 1904. And it's a still ongoing history. I mean, there are 2 movie theaters in operation on that same block right now.
Sure.
So it's a really interesting context that we can put these movies into, because there's so much wiggle room and playroom, and we can kind of decide where we want to delve and where we want to go with the history.
Yeah, it feels like a real crossover with what we do and kind of have done with, this all kind of started with a group of friends finding their footing and finding a way to shine a light on the drive-in culture or keep it alive in a way that we remembered it. And it caught on, and we just keep kind of feeding that beast, which it feels like you guys established this foundation and found that audience that continues to grow, just like ours. And it's really about just feeding that audience, which you guys seem to have an endless well with the 42nd Street Gold.
It's true. And what I'll say really quickly before I pass the baton to Jeff is that New Yorkers love New York City. Like, people who live here love living here. And I think the reason why we have such a devoted fan base is that people just love New York history. They love hearing stories about New York.
You're delivering a tourist mentality to them.
Yeah, and just really kind of digging into how the city's evolved and how it's always been a reflection of like the greater either the country or the world. One thing I will say is that we did 7 months at Videology, and then Nitehawk Cinema basically invited us over around the corner. We're at Nitehawk Williamsburg on Metropolitan, and we've been there since September of 2013. And that's when we made the switch to 35 millimeter. And I don't think, and Jeff, you can share your thoughts about 35. For me, it's not like a 35 millimeter geek out, like purist thing.
Sure.
It's more of, we're really trying to time travel. We're really trying to take you back to 1978 when such and such film was playing at the Lyric on that block that weekend. So my thinking, at least, is like, we're going to show you the format you would have seen then.
Yeah, when it made its way, it had its theatrical run and landed on 42nd Street to hit audiences. So
for better or for worse, because sometimes the prints that we show are like really red and really splicey. We call it deucey, like really deucey prints.
Yeah, I say there is definitely an appeal to the 35 millimeter and the attraction of the drive-in and what you guys are doing, where not only are you seeing it in a classic setting, you're seeing it in its classic format as audiences would have seen it.
And in some cases, you're seeing it on a piece of film that dates back to that era.
Totally.
So like red or beat up or not, the audiences who sat there at the Lyric seeing this film, in the scheme of things, could have been watching on this very same print that your modern audience is looking at.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what the purists of New York City are paying for when they go to 35 millimeter. Like, they want that artifact and that kind of relationship to a physical print that is telling its own story through its splices and its scratches and its faded color. Jeff, what do you think about 35 millimeter?
When I first came to the city and started going to repertory and seeing movies, they didn't have 4K restorations. They didn't have, you were lucky to see something that wasn't a mess. Right. But I was lucky to see it. That's all I cared about, was being able to see it. First time I saw The Wild Bunch in a movie theater was rear screen projection on 16 millimeter. And I was just as happy to see that because, yeah, I was excited to be in a movie theater watching these things.
It's about that experience, that communal experience together.
You know, I did have when we were doing the videology, I liked that freedom of being able to just like show anything we wanted because we didn't have to worry about.
Yeah, they were free. So there was no rights issues whatsoever. Yeah. If it existed on DVD, we showed it.
Hell yeah.
Or if I could download it somewhere. Yeah. But then being able to move to Nitehawk and really do that work to try to like get these on film is part of the excitement.
Hell yeah.
I think
such a flash.
Coming every month to see it. We're showing Devil Times 5, and very soon into the film, I guess the reel came off the projector and was all over the floor. And so instead of just like waiting to fix it, they threw on a Blu-ray of it, I guess, until they fixed it and then switched back over. And yeah, the print was pink and the Blu-ray wasn't. The Blu-ray, somebody there later was like, "Oh, what do you have against color?" And I'm like, I don't know.
We just like showing one at a time.
I also, one color at a time. But I think once you get into it, that becomes the world that you're in. You know, the film, the 35 millimeter brings you into this world that the movie's in, and it becomes that special. Then everything it looks normal for the movie.
It's transportive, and I think there's like you said, people appreciate when it looks great, but they're there for that experience, and I liken it a lot to relate to people who just don't get it. It's like the vinyl collectors. You can go to them and say, you know, why do you love vinyl? It sounds so much richer. It has a lived-in feel. I can hold it, you know, all that. Like, it's the same crossover with 35 millimeter or film in general. And, you know, really what you guys are doing with the New York scene and giving the history beforehand, I think that is just like an added layer of icing that solidifies a community. I mean, that's really what we have seen is, you know, the commitment and the dedication to what we do, and the fact that it's been going for so long. We were looking at the list of films that you guys played, like, it's mind-bending. And the fact that you guys were able to get these all on 35 millimeter film is even more amazing. So can I ask, like, what is that process like as far as getting these prints? Are they privately sourced? Are they coming from studios? Is it a mix? And
it's a mix. Yeah. It's a mix. And it's Christina and John at Nitehawk tracking them down for us. It's usually giving them a bunch of stuff that I want to get, and if they can get it, and if they can't, I'll come up with something else.
Yeah. I always say it's like throwing darts at a dartboard at the beginning of the season. I'll throw requests to the studios, and it'll be like, even if I get 20% yes, I'm gold.
Well, shout out to Christina and John, because
oh my God, yeah.
Just to go a little deeper with, you know, Jeff, like he said, he has this magic of kind of we look at an entire year. And so Jeff will think 12 months out, and and we can get into this a little later, Jeff, if you want to, but I think there's a really brilliant process going on with Jeff in terms of what he wants to play when, and the B and C choice. Okay. Yeah. But Christina and John do this, like, they kind of keep us from the real nitty-gritty work, and they do this unbelievable work sourcing rights and then sourcing down the prints, and takes a lot of work off of our plate, which I personally wouldn't want to go down that road at all. But I mean, you know, just a couple standouts. 92 in the Shade was a print that we shipped in from Australia. It was the only known print in the world, and it took like 2 years to find it. And the great thing is that there are a lot of, you guys know about this because it's just in terms of nationwide repertory programming, there's a lot of eyes on the Deuce and what Jeff's curating. So it's great because, like, we shipped in 92 in the Shade, and immediately, like, the New Bev picked it up. And
started popping up everywhere, yeah.
Dan Halstead picked it up for his theater in Portland, Oregon. And so we were able to, like, the print got booked a handful of times before it was shipped back to Australia. One of the great joys of this series is that there's a gorgeous print that came from Raphael Zelinsky himself, and we showed a beautiful print of Valet Girls or Hey Babe, or we're showing a studio print, you know, a great print of King Kong or Dirty Little Billy.
It's that dig. I think people appreciate it as well because they are starting to recognize that 35 millimeter is getting harder and harder to keep alive, which is pretty much our whole stage show before the road show. It's talking about, hey, you guys are all historians because you're here supporting 35 millimeter. And that's really what it's all about, is letting people know what is so important about this medium and what is so special about this once in a lifetime screening when you're at a 35 millimeter presentation. Before we get to kind of your key roles, Jeff, like, can I gush over you? So your history is insane. Like, I'm a video store guy. We're the home of VHS Fest for the last 10 years. You were kind of a huge part of that with Kim's Video and that closing down, which led you to this videology. Am I correct?
It led me to needing to get another job, which I worked at, and then I started working with Joe at Film Forum. So
yeah,
but it was like one of my first jobs in the city, right when it was kind of starting. I got to go through the whole, like, it becoming what Kim's would be known for, kind of that like ridiculous structuring of the store with all the subsections. And I mean, yeah, that was another, you know, I moved to New York City to be able to see movies, so that was another big. And you know, and when I went to interview for the job, I had to take like a movie knowledge test, and I was like, oh, that seems like it's the place for me. And then and then they quickly put me in charge of ordering the straight porn. So all the knowledge
they
about
picked you right out.
Elsie's favorite cameraman and all that stuff hadn't yet.
Oh, that's great.
Being.
That's something I didn't know about Jeff until right now. So
yes,
Virgil,
another chapter for the book.
I told Jeff before you hopped on, I was telling them how, like, you're a really stinky red onion at this point. Like the layers that get peeled off still after 25 years of knowing you, it's like, it gets more and more pungent. I had no idea.
How many lives can a man
I had no idea you were the buyer for straight porn when you were like, what, 19, 20?
Yeah, something around that age. I wasn't even that well versed in it. But however, like, that was also part of the 42nd Street thing for me.
How much did those years inform your movie knowledge and eventual programming with the Deuce?
I don't know how much knowledge I got from, but that idea of communal moviegoing, it was a big part of that whole, like, this is something you do with a bunch of people in a theater, and just that idea that, like, oh, this is a very particular place where you could just like walk down the street and it's just non-stop. It's just like every door has something you could go see. So it's like really just wide open. Yeah, it just seemed limitless.
And really dense at the same time.
Yeah.
I started going to New York City when I was probably 6 or 7 in the mid 80s with my parents because they were really big theater people and we lived just 3 hours north of here. So we would go in a lot. So I never went into the movie theaters of the Deuce like Jeff did, but I remember Old Times Square and I remember the old 42nd Street. And like Jeff said, it's limitless in terms of the kind of experience you could have that night, but it was so dense. Like I said at the very top of my show when I'm describing it, on that one block was, technically speaking, was 14 theaters. And it was actually, if I do the math, oh my God, in my head, 30 screens because of the Roxy and the Harem, in addition to the 12 movie palaces. And at 30 screens would be showing double and triple features. So on one weekend, there could be 60 to 90 movies playing in one block.
Spinning around that one block. Wow.
One block. One thing that Jeff and I have learned like so much in digging into the history here, but there eventually became, and there's reasons for this, but there eventually became a time when Deuce theaters were no longer listing their movies, and they certainly weren't being advertised. In the 70s, 80s,
like up to people to stumble upon it.
Well, exactly. So, to get into it, like if the distributor of A View to a Kill was showing A View to a Kill around the corner at the Lowe's State, the View to a Kill ad would feature the Lowe's State as the one and only Midtown theater that was showing A View to a Kill. It wouldn't list that A View to a Kill was also playing around the corner at the Selwyn as an A pick to, B pick Goldfinger, because they were making half the money. And it was also, that's where kids from Uptown came. That's where Bridge and Tunnel kids came. It wasn't something that was promoted in an advertisement space in the Daily News or the Post or the New York Times. And there was definitely like a good 10-year stretch where even the listing, there weren't even showtimes listed in the Post or the Daily News or the Village Voice. So you literally had to walk down the block and look at the marquees to even see what was playing.
Amazing.
I mean, that was my experience with it. It was like, I didn't look in the paper and be like, oh, I'm going to go see this at this time. I would just go to 42nd Street and like be like, oh, this is playing. I'll go see that at this,
What a time.
And doing that with it on a date is even more fun, because then it was like, you couldn't really say exactly what you were going to do. You would just...
Oh, yeah. Talk about adventure.
Be on an adventure.
What are we doing? Well, we'll see.
We'll see when we get there.
What are we getting into?
And, in terms of adventure on that block, these theaters were open from 10 a.m. to 4 a.m. There was only a 6-hour window when they were closed. So you could really hole up in one theater all day, or you could just spend all weekend on the block, bouncing from theater to theater, and this is sort of widely written about and discussed now in histories of theater going, and Jeff can speak to this. It's like the crowds that simple fact alone would attract, who are trying to beat the heat in the summer or beat the cold in the winter. They needed a place where they can hold up, whether they were like unhoused persons, or they just wanted to go and like get drunk in the balcony, or they wanted to sell drugs, or they wanted to sell prostitutes, or they were just on a date hanging out. Like, there's so many different kinds of people under one roof, with this open door policy where you could walk in and walk out at any point during either feature. So there were no rules that exist now in who can come in.
It was not the Alamo. It was not the Alamo.
Of course, there was nothing to be texting on, and there was no reason to get on a cell phone.
Sure.
But, I work at Film Forum. That's where I met Jeff. I've been there 25 years. It's like, we are the art house cinema that's doing exactly what the Deuce was doing for fucking 60 years, 70 years, in terms of the kind of programming we do and what we're sort of aspiring to do. But there are all the rules. No entry after the first 20 minutes, shut the hell up, and don't smell bad. Those rules didn't exist then. You could smoke in those theaters.
Sure.
You could do it with weed. I mean, no one was policing you if you had a flask. I mean, that's just the way movie theaters, and they were giant theaters. They were single screens with 2,000 seats. Yeah. So plenty of places you could hole up and not be bothered and do whatever you needed to do, whether that was take a nap or get a hand job. Yeah.
I never thought about it until you just put it that way. But what you're describing was the appeal of the drive-in for a lot of people for a long time too. It was a place you could go away from everybody else. You're in your own little pod. You park in the back, and whatever happens, happens.
Totally. I mean, it's like, there's movies playing if you want to see the movie, but it's also basically a cheap place to waste time. Yeah. And that is always important in a densely populated urban area, especially, I mean, then we can get into, this is all pre-internet, all really pre-VHS if you're talking pre-82. So it's like, it's a cheap place to hang out, dirt cheap.
And the show isn't always on the screen, as they used to say.
That's right. Yeah. Can you guys paint a little picture as far as what your guys' roles are, how the shows go? I know you guys do a big involved raffle. That's become the big thing. How did that all evolve, and how much had you retained?
Sure.
The Deuce famous raffle. That's what it's called.
Deuce. Yeah.
The Deuce famous raffle. So again, like I said, my ideas were really strong when I kind of created this little fantasy, and I had pitched it to the curator at Videology. And then that very first day, we sort of magically fell into our roles. So here's the whole show in a nutshell. And again, it's to be like a time travel kind of moment. You walk in, to Theater 1 at Nitehawk Cinema. There's a pre-show of about 30 minutes. What we do for the pre-show is we show trailers of all the other movies that were playing on the block that weekend. So as if you were walking down the block on, August 10th, 1976. And that's not 35. I just capture that off YouTube and we'll throw it up as like a keynote presentation, just so I have that flexibility to download and show 18 trailers from movies that were playing on or around the Deuce that weekend. So the idea is that you're walking down the block and you decide to stumble into the Lyric Theater to see Eaten Alive with us. I'll kick it off by talking a little bit about the film in question. And again, not really so much about film production history, more about like when it opened, how it played, to whom it played, kind of like how it built its audience or found its audience. We had a co-host named tour guide Andy McCarthy, who's a brilliant monologuist and historian and writer. He's worked at the New York Public Library for decades. He would do the theater monologue, and this is all with multimedia and slides. So he would do these like really tripped out, sort of beatnik, stream of consciousness, hilarious monologues about the theater in question, taking you through the history of the theater, where he would like fall into like Borscht Belt jokes and with a Yiddish accent, and he would like, with like Noel Coward's affectations, do like a bit of a mock soliloquy from a Noel Coward play. And then we'll go into the film. They will show the film, and the film really always stands on its own, with or without whatever we're doing. The focus really is about the movie, so we try not to detract too much from it with our like shenanigans and stupidity. Afterwards, Jeff and I host the raffle, and Jeff, I'll have him tell you about that in a minute. He puts a lot of care and time and effort into 5 different raffle prizes. They're sort of raffle bags, so there's multiple items in each raffle prize, the culmination of which is a very special thing that Jeff works on, which I'll have him tell you about. Afterwards, there's always there was a post-party. It's now transitioned into a pre-party, where Jeff DJs music inspired by the movie that you just saw. And what we'll do is, if there was a B pick, we'll run the B pick. We'll project the B pick silently at low res bar downstairs while Jeff is playing music over it. So you had the whole night. You had the whole night when you went to the Lyric and you saw Eaten Alive.
Get immersed.
Jeff, let's talk about the raffle a little bit.
What about the raffle? We got prizes. We got a lot of good prizes for
Yeah, like legendary cool prizes. Where are you pulling all this madness from, this gold? And what's the standard that you've set?
It's very high or very low, depending on how you're listening.
Trying not to spend a lot of money. Try to spend as little money as possible.
He still ends up spending way too much money, by the way.
I don't know. I mean, I try to find things related to the movie or related to the people in the movie. Something people might like to have themselves after having seen this movie.
Yeah.
Always put together like a soundtrack CD. If the movie had an actual soundtrack release, that's one thing. If it didn't, I can just cobble one together from a file download of the movie. And then you'll get like a lot of like dialogue and stuff mixed in.
Anybody who's there for it, they'd love that. Yeah.
I was very excited with the Caged Heat soundtrack I put together, just because it's a John Cale soundtrack, and there's no way to just like listen to it. But yeah, I made each musical moment into songs. I don't know.
It's a really good blend. Before we get to your posters, Jeff, it's a really good blend of actual artifacts that Jeff like mines from eBay and from collectors and stuff, and this homemade shit. Like Jeff's DVDs and CDs, and we make a lot of T-shirts. We have a pin guy who will make pins for us. So we usually a couple times a year we'll do a pin that Jeff designs, and then Jeff makes the grand prize is an original one sheet that Jeff hand draws, and magic markers. Are you using markers?
Yeah, markers.
Yeah. So Jeff will just recreate the night with the marquee of the theater in question. And do a hand drawing of the movie you just saw. It's always on the back side of an actual movie poster. So like if you don't like his drawing,
you get a 2-for-1.
You get some crazy foreign film from 1980s that we steal from Film Forum.
Yes.
That's become totally iconic. Jeff has done. When did you start doing the posters, Jeff?
It was, I think, our second show at
Nitehawk.
Nitehawk.
It was the Driller Killer.
Amos Poe.
Did you?
No,
Yeah,
Amos Poe.
No. Okay, wait. Driller
Killer. Right.
Killer.
Driller Killer was before that. So this is the whole reason it started. We're showing Driller Killer. You can't buy a Driller Killer poster anywhere for under $800. There's no way anybody's getting a Driller Killer poster. Yeah. So I'm like, shit, I guess I'll just make our own. And that's what
I got a marker.
That's how that started. Yeah. And I'll make it specific to us and specific to the theater that it's showing at. And that's how it started.
With incorrect spellings and all. There have been times. Perfect. There have been times.
I've got. Yeah.
When Nitehawk has been spelled incorrectly, despite the fact that I've been there for 13 years.
I've done it a million times. I've had wrong dates. I've had wrong dates on there. Oh, I was very excited about this one. We're showing Night of the Juggler, in which the bad guy, whatever, the kidnapper, there's a great foot chase scene through Times Square where he's dragging Brolin's daughter around, and you see them go by the Times Square theater, which on the marquee is Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia and Tintorera. And so I'm like, okay, the month after Night of the Juggler, we're going to show Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia.
See, that's the level of showmanship and the level of commitment that people they eat it up, there's no doubt that when you go to a show and get the experience that you guys deliver, it's like these guys' hearts are just so into this, and that is infectious. We've seen it.
You get tons of Easter eggs, and the beauty of doing it, as long as we've done it, it's it's now eating itself, but we're so meta. I mean, at this point, it's meta. It's so postmodern, it's sickening. Jeff and I try not to take that highfalutin approach, but I was thinking earlier today about how self-referential the show has sort of become. We are absolutely eating ourselves at this point.
I don't know. We got a great lineup coming.
No. I'm not saying we're repeating ourselves, Jeff. I'm saying we're eating ourselves. It's different.
Yeah. Well worth it. Well, I want to give Mark the opportunity to pick your guys' brain as well, but we are the Drive-In podcast. I'm curious about your guys' experience with drive-ins, whether it was hopefully as a child or eventually.
I'll go first because Jeff has a lot to say. I have never in my life been to a drive-in.
Wow, we're going to change that. We are changing.
Well, that's not true. I'll amend that in 1 second. So growing up in Rhode Island in the 1980s, we did not have an operational drive-in. The closest one was Southern Massachusetts. So I never went to a drive-in, and now I'm amending what I said. The first and only drive-in experience I've ever had, which kind of, I guess, is fair. COVID, New York Film Festival, they ran a drive-in in the parking lot of the Bronx Zoo. And
wow, like pop-up style, I take it.
Pop-up style, and John Waters curated and hosted a double feature of Climax and Sallow. Pretty fucking awesome.
Shit,
that's all I'll say about that. Jeff, take it away.
Take it away. I have a more modern experience with.
No. Go all the way back to when you were 5 years old.
Yeah, I'm curious.
You don't want me to start with the more recent. The more recent one's a pretty good story, actually.
We want it all.
I was traveling through New Mexico, Carlsbad-ish, outside of the Carlsbad Caverns. There's a drive-in out there. We were at the caverns at a certain time, around dusk. It's very famous. This bat population comes swooping out of the caverns, fills the sky. Yeah. We had a choice between waiting around to see the bats or heading to the drive-in to catch the movie, and I picked the drive-in.
Drive-in won.
Missed the bats and saw, I believe, Get Smart at the drive-in. It was that. But I had to do it because in the modern age, there's not a whole lot of chance to do that. Growing up, I grew up in Virginia Beach and Norfolk. Amazingly, had a lot of drive-ins. We had the Shore Drive-In was the one that I went to the most, I think, and there was the Sand and Surf Drive-In, which was a 2-screen drive-in. So you're facing one way watching a movie, and then there's another movie playing behind you.
Yes,
on
that
the
was
other
the big
screen.
craze. They started splitting up their theaters.
Yeah. Supposedly, what I just now looking into it realized possibly the first twin drive-in in the eastern United States.
Wow.
That one I remember seeing mostly Disney movies at.
Yeah.
I remember some of the Love Bug movies being there.
Yes.
All great stuff. The Shore drive-in was bigger, like a bigger screen. It was a single. A very unforgettable. We're there at the Shore drive-in. Me and my friend Greg are like sitting on the hood of the car watching the movie.
Yeah, hell yeah.
It's Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yes.
And the spaceships are coming right out of the friggin' sky. Because you're outside and they're just incredible.
Mark always says the space movies play amazingly. It's like you can't where the screen ends and the sky begins, you know?
Yeah, it was thrilling. However, the more thrilling drive-in that I had never gone to, the Norfolk drive-in, which I never went to, probably I wouldn't have been allowed. The Norfolk drive-in was also a single screen, and it was right next to the toll road that led between Virginia Beach and Norfolk.
Yeah, main roadway.
Yeah, highway. I was 64, I think. And that was my grandparents lived, like most of our family lived in Norfolk. So every time we would visit, say my grandmother, coming home late at night, that was the way the screen faced. So if you're coming back from Norfolk going to Virginia Beach, you could see the screen and it was always naked ladies. And every time I'm just like,
glued to the window.
Can't we just get a flat tire? Can just
drive a little slower?
Yeah, just like there's something wrong with the car. Pull over. And
it's like, why is Jeff bringing his binoculars every time we go to Grandma's house?
That was
that'll stick with you.
And that was also, that led into coming to New York for the first time and going down Times Square and seeing all this advertised similar things. And it's like now I can see all this stuff.
I mean, what I mentioned earlier that I started coming down when I was 6 and 7 years old, and Times Square was that was like the peak of 80s red light district.
Yeah,
and nothing was censored. There was nothing.
As a 6-year-old, you're like, whoa.
Oh, I mean, more than whoa. It was just, it was so titillating and dangerous and exciting. And it's absolutely what brought me back to the city to live here in 1999. A lot of that had been, of course, whitewashed and a lot of it had changed post Giuliani. But nothing was, these strip clubs were just wide open. And these porno shops, there were monitors in the windows facing out into the street running hardcore porn. There was nothing was censored at all.
Yeah.
And as a very young kid, it was very confusing and exciting that like we would be going to see Into the Woods or the Phantom of the Opera, Star Express, and like walking by extremely raunchy shit. And I could feel my dad's hand like squeezing my hand a little tighter with all these like wild people on the streets. Yeah. It was very confusing and and like really, really exciting, and then I started to come down in the early 90s with my high school and really started to see the neighborhood change, which was also remarkable. I mean, there was like that 6 or 7 year window, would you say, Jeff? Like starting around 1990 when everything started to shut down.
Yeah. It was
until about 96, 97 when like, Disney revitalized and reopened everything. And the neighborhood was so bizarre. Like that 5 or 6, 7 year period.
That's when it was scary. That's when
it was scary. It wasn't scary before, and it's not really scary now. It was scary when it was desolate. I mean, desolation in an urban center, that's what makes things dangerous and scary. Is when things are closed.
Right.
And not in operation, Jeff has a great story.
That's when I got chased around the neighborhood by a couple of guys who had ill will against me.
Yeah, ironically, Jeff ran down the Deuce when it was completely shuttered, being chased by these kids,
looking for somewhere to escape to,
and ended up in the Marriott Marquis lobby, and then getting kicked out of the Marriott Marquis lobby.
The guy would not let me. I'm like, these guys are out there waiting for me.
There isn't a better metaphor for like that particular moment in Times Square, where like Jeff's shelter was the Marriott Marquis and couldn't even hang out there to escape getting mugged.
Crazy.
They did point me to a different exit.
Yeah, you can hide
The
over.
guys weren't waiting for me, so I was able to. Well,
that was good of them.
But it was similar during COVID because I mean, this is where I live now. I live in Times Square basically, and during COVID, that's pretty much how it felt more like that. It was like the only people out here are desperate and
up to no good.
Yeah, and there's no one else to like focus on except you.
Yeah, COVID was wild because the whole block, I went down the block and I wrote about it on a piece that we wrote for Movie Notebook, where I kind of cataloged what the block became in COVID. And it was like the McDonald's and the Candler building had closed down for good. You know, the Regal was shut down. Empire 25 was running at like 25% capacity at this time. This was like March 2021. It was like 70% of the block was defunct or closed or, out of commission. And that's frightening for any city to have 70% of a block closed off and shut down. And that's what it was in 1990, literally like 31 years earlier, before they started raising those buildings and building new structures. And then 31 years later, because of a pandemic, same thing happened. It was really bizarre.
So was it that early 90s period? When was it that all of the 42nd Street theaters really started going down like dominoes?
90 to 96. The Harris was the last standing movie theater, and that closed in the summer of 96.
Harris was the one I went to the most when it was all still up.
There were attempts to revitalize the neighborhood as early as the 70s. And in the 80s, the mayor at the time, Ed Koch, had a really aggressive campaign called the 42nd Street Development Project, which was a pretty nasty eminent domain project where like the city would just consider something a blight to the public and would go in. It would be private property, owned privately. The city would go in and determine that it wasn't up to code. They would seize it from the private owner, and then they would just turn around and sell it to, corporate America, basically. So he had his eyes on this giant, like 30 block radius stretch of land in Midtown in the 80s to basically just seize, knock down, and redevelop. So that was about a 20-year process culminating in what we know now. Disney had a lot to do with that because Disney was the first big corporation to get on 42nd, to get on the Deuce specifically and take over the New Amsterdam Theater. They signed a 99-year lease in that building in 96. And they revitalized the building, and that's their main showplace for the Disney Broadway monstrosities that happen all the time currently. But I mean, again, for better or for worse, right? I mean, they went in and they took at that time, a 92-year-old theater and restored it to its original splendor. So you can go see Aladdin for $350. So, it depends on how you feel about these things. I mean, currently on the Deuce right now, there's the New Amsterdam, the New Victory, which is amazing because the Victory became the most notorious XXX screen on the Deuce, and now it's a children's theater, a nonprofit live children's theater. The Lyric and the Apollo were combined to make the New Lyric Theater, where you can see the Harry Potter play. The Selwyn was redeveloped by a nonprofit theater company called Roundabout. The Empire, the structure of the lobby of the Empire was moved about 900 feet down the block, and then AMC took it over and built a structure behind it, and it's a 25-screen multiplex. So, a handful of the theaters have been saved and restored and are being used as theaters, but the other half of the theaters are long gone, razed and rebuilt.
That's one of those things that people share the history and share then and now photos. And I take perverse joy in knowing that, the most notorious 42nd Street Theater now hosts children's theater, and the former show world is now a Smash Burger, and all these things where if the tourists now knew if they could just dial back time a couple decades, they'd be horrified to know the spaces they're currently occupying.
Absolutely.
That was a great Dirty Looks.
Yeah, there's a really great queer film and video art series called Dirty Looks that our Fred Bradford Nordine founded and hosted. He's now based in Los Angeles, but he kind of gave me the whole idea of the Deuce. In 2011, he took over the entire month of July. Every single day, he did like an installation piece, site specific, on a spot that had a sort of historical significance. And
Yeah, like on site type of or on set type of things.
yeah. I mean, he called it Dirty Looks on Location. And the best thing that he did, he took over a booth in the back of the Shake Shack on 44th and 8th Avenue, which used to be the Cameo, which was a gay porn theater. Yeah. And he sat in the booth the entire day, and you had to go in, you had to get yourself a milkshake, so you had a reason to be there for 20 minutes, and then go to the back, and on his iPad, he showed the short that played at the Cameo, that premiered at the Cameo. And so that little moment that I had, like sitting at a fucking Shake Shack surrounded by tourists drinking a milkshake, that's totally what inspired what Jeff and I are doing.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I love that the big sell for us taking this on the road is connecting to the like-minded people that run these 35 millimeter theaters, indoor theaters. But it's so inspiring to see what other theaters do, how they've been inspired. And that's the one thing I loved about your guys' story is that, you know, you really took amazing curation to heart and kind of carried that over into what you do. I say you're nothing without your inspirations, and I just love that you guys have taken that and now deliver that to us.
Something I always felt very strongly about 42nd Street, Deuce, whatever, there was always this aspect of repertory to it. I could be here in the mid 80s and still go see Dawn of the Dead in a movie theater. Just like this combination of new and old all on one block.
What looked like very savvy curation on the block in the 80s or the 70s was actually, it wasn't savvy curation at all. Not much thought was behind it. It was just booking rights. You know, it was just who's the distributor of EQUINOX, for example, and did they have the rights to the War of the Gargantuas from 1966, 4 years prior. That's why the War of the Gargantuas was the B pick to EQUINOX when it opened at the Empire Theater in December of 1970. So there was always a repertory aspect, typically to the B or C picks. If you walked into Bill Lustig's new movie Vigilante, you would likely see Maniac as well. So yeah, like Jeff said, it's a whole like film education, and it's what art house nonprofit cinemas are now aspiring to do. It was doing by design. It just happened to be booked that way.
Yeah.
So the Deuce is a very popular ongoing series. Like we've already sold out EQUINOX in like a month ahead of time. You've sold out another show recently. At what point, if you can recall, did the tide turn for the Deuce where people were just showing up because it was they had trust in your programming? They knew the Deuce was going to be a good time, so they would just come out for it almost regardless of what you were showing.
Really fast. I mean, I think Jeff and I, by the time we put this show on in 2012, we were already like pretty popular guys. I mean, like we can pull a crowd. You know, Jeff has been like throwing parties and DJing and showing movies for 20 years. I had been throwing dance parties and booking rock shows for 15 years. So, I mean, we were packed from the very first show.
Excellent.
That's really important to us. Like, if we're going to do it, then let's fucking pack it.
Hell yeah.
But to answer your question, now it always sells out. We sell out every show long in advance. I feel like it's about 60 to 80% like total Deuce diehards who come every single month regardless. Many of whom we were never friends with before. They just found us and kind of fell in love with us. And then maybe like the other 20 to 30% of the crowd is like specifically there for Sign of the Times or specifically there for Killer on Wheels. And then they're like hooked. They're like, okay, these guys are fun. We'll come back again. That probably, I don't know, when did that start happening, Jeff? I mean, we started in the smaller house, which was 66 seats at Nitehawk. And then we moved up to the bigger house, which was 100 seats. I don't know, maybe 1 year in.
I do remember being like demoted back down to the small theater when we did Razorback. I couldn't really understand that. I was like,
Yeah, there were a
Should-
couple times. I think that was all just programming stuff, though. Yeah.
But pretty much since then, we've been upstairs the whole time, I think.
It's just, I think someone, maybe it was Screen Slate, someone just, look, I think, I'll say this, we could fact check it. I'm pretty certain The Deuce is now the longest running like independent series in New York history.
Wow.
I think we just beat a series called Queer Art Film, which was independently curated and presented at IFC by Ira Sachs and Adam Barron. I think we're the longest running series now, ever. With the exception of Movie Friends, Jeff. Movie Friends has run longer than we have. Jeff has a Sunday night, very late night series that he does at KGB Bar. And before that, you were at what, Cinema Nolita?
It started at a video store that me and other friends were working at. And our friend Michael, who owned the video store, video store's not making any money. He's paying his employees out of his own real job.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, let's show a movie and it'll be free, but it'll get people to come to the store and, maybe they'll come back to the store.
Yeah.
And I remember showing, I don't know if we did Basket Case or if we did
Bad Biology.
Bad Biology.
Yeah.
And Henenlotter came to the video store, and there were 5 people.
Wow.
And he talked for like 2 hours after the movie to the 5 people that were there.
Amazing.
But then, because it was untenable as a video, then it closed. We got a chance to use the theater through a friend who's a bartender at KGB, set it up that we could use the theater for free at KGB, the Crane Theater, as it was or is called, a real theater.
Yeah.
They did live theater there, but nobody's going to be using it at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, so you guys can use it.
Yeah. We're like, whatever, we're not picking.
Yeah. And it brings people to the bar, so it's good for the bar on a Sunday night to have. And we've been doing that at least 20 years. I don't know.
That's the commitment,
insane.
You don't have a home. Oh well, we're gonna do this in my basement if we have to.
Totally. Yeah.
But it came out. It's my friend Chris picks most of the movies, and we talk about stuff that we want to see, and we work together at Kim's. So it's a lot of
nice crossover.
It came out of Kim. Yeah, it came out of Kim's, and
A lot of super deep cuts, like how The Deuce started. It's like super deep cuts sourced from whatever you can get your hands on, right?
yeah, and it's free, so there's nothing
Swing
to worry
for the
about.
fence, baby.
legal-wise.
And no rights issues at KGB for Jeff.
So
Oh, there was some really kind of offensive article about it because we were showing the new Woody Allen movie, and I don't know, they just got it all wrong. They're like, oh, this private, it's not private, it's open to anybody who wants to, it's free.
Just a bunch of movie friends.
Yeah, movie friends. Yes, we did show the new Woody Allen movie. It was horrible. The new Polanski movie, however, incredible. Or the Castle. But also that's the same thing with programming for the Deuce. The idea of showing the Polanski movie, I don't know, it was important to we knew nobody else was going to be showing it.
Right.
So somebody's got to show it. Programming for the Deuce, obviously, everybody wants to show something that you might not be able to see somewhere else. I was convinced that I would be one of a small little handful of audience members at Vibes. I had no idea that anybody would come to Vibes. I just wanted to sit there and listen to Cyndi Lauper talk for an hour and a half. I was going to be happy, and then I don't know, it sold out, and people had fun. People liked it. It was
Of course, it sold out. Cyndi Lauper and Jeff Goldblum. It's that's a no-brainer.
They were so good.
Jeff is surprised, I think, by his own choices a lot of the time, and how good they are, and how enthusiastic people are to see this stuff.
Yeah.
The point is that Jeff and I are very pre-social media. I'm 46. Jeff is 54. 56? How
I think
old are
I'm
you?
56. I think
You're
I'm 56, Joe.
I'll be 46 in May. We're pre-social media. We come from we're cut from a cloth that we just want to bring people together and have a good time, IRL, as they say, in real life, and that's what you do. I mean, Jeff and I will close the bar. We're out later and we go harder and we go longer than the Gen Z kids that show up to our parties, you know?
Got to be the same thing at the drive-in. It's like you have to be here for this. Either you're here for this right now or you miss it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, late night is our mode. So like we'll do a double or a triple feature and then we'll run something, at least one thing after that for anybody who's hanging around on video and we'll stay and hang out. That's the time, like we're off the clock at that point. So like you guys, after the screening, that's when you can just kind of hang out and socialize and have fun. Was there ever a title or are there any standout titles for you for the Deuce that are either the ones that got away or the ones that you're still hoping one day you can source?
Oh, yes. Oh my God. HR Puffin stuff.
Yeah.
Apparently the only print around is in New Zealand. And apparently that's very expensive to get a print shipped here from New Zealand. Oh, and also we haven't gotten into like the Mondo movie aspect of what was on the Deuce. I have been holding out to get into that with Mr. Mike's Mondo video, which is a satire, I guess you would say, of Mondo movies, but also like one that would not be included in a Mondo movie series
right
anywhere else. And it's got some great New York stuff in it. The thing that is really exciting is that all the ones that didn't get away, I've gotten to sit in a theater and see movies that I've always wanted to see in a theater. So much through this.
Oh yeah, we know that well. You know, you program for an audience that you hope will show up so that you can afford to keep doing it, but you program for yourself every once in a while. And I've had some fabulous nights at the drive-in, not particularly caring if anybody but me was having a good time. So I know it well.
But just also, yeah, that you have an opportunity to do this with, you know, a theater full of people or a theater full of cars.
And to do it with your friends too. I mean, the fact that you guys put this together, it's
so when you're at the drive-in with your friends, do you all sit in the same car or?
Most people sit outside now.
Yeah, that seems to be the culture shift.
I think if you have like one friend sitting in your car is fine, but I realized that once you grow up above a certain height, the back seat doesn't really work for watching movies.
No fun except for necking, you know.
I remember like people would bring their own lawn chairs.
Yeah.
And, sit outside their cars and stuff like that.
The big push, you know. I remember the big shift when people started backing in and lifting up their hatches. It went from parking straight forward where you're looking at the screen to backing up and sitting behind your car or sitting inside your car or whatever the case is with the hatch open.
Yeah.
How long has Mahoning been in this like current iteration of its history?
Yeah, we opened in 49. We went all retro in 2014.
Oh, sweet. Have you guys been there the whole time since 2014?
Yeah. Mark came in a little later than me, but yeah, pretty much the whole entire time that we shifted and went repertory and built what the Mahoning has kind of become known for, you know, which is the ultimate fan events.
Absolutely. And what's your season? When do you start and when do you close?
April through Halloween.
And a follow-up, which is similar to Mark's question. What's a dead crowd? How many people or cars or how many people is a dead show? And then how many people, what's like been your biggest hit in terms of turnout?
Definitely the biggest, most oversold show we ever did was the Joe Bob's Jamboree. We were the first location for that and brought Joe Bob in. I think we sold probably close to 900 tickets both days, you know?
Amazing.
So we
I have a Joe Bob story.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Before that, I want to hear what a dead show would be.
Yeah, I mean, the bar has so changed. Like when we first started in the documentary at the drive-in, it's documented me looking out that bay door hoping for one car to show up so we can run. Now that bar shifted a little bit. We say if we can pay for the print licensing, we're happy campers, you know? So, but it's few and far between now. Even our Thursday and Sunday shows where we do single features draw incredibly well and draw a fandom that is just as hype as a Friday and Saturday show.
Sure. And I have two other follow-up questions. What's the percentage of the crowd that's like sitting on lawn chairs now versus actually in their cars?
Yeah, it's tough to say. We always say there's the party in the back, and it's also like the party where if you're bringing your lady, you're parking in the back as well. So
Right.
it seems like from like concession stand up, which is like the first at least 5 or 6 rows, most people are outside of their cars. They're setting up shop in front of their vehicles.
And then my last follow up, I promise. How many people are locals, and how many people are like people who are traveling in specifically to see something with you guys?
The vast majority are people who are traveling in. We always joke that the locals don't even know that we're still open.
Yeah, we'll wear our gear into, the local whatever supermarket, and they're like, "Oh, I used to go there as a kid. It's a shame they're not open anymore." It's like, how much more, like on the radar can we get for you guys?
The marquee changes twice a week.
Yeah, it's a big hunting fishing area, so it's like they're focused on other things. I think the idea is Philly, Jersey, New York, the surrounding areas, they're coming in every single day, every single night. And the locals grow too.
I say this because it's shocking because I started as a customer who was driving down from New Hampshire every weekend. We have people who fly in from California and New Orleans and drive out from Michigan. We have a guy, Tom, from Michigan. He's there so often people don't realize he doesn't live locally. It's just this crazy, people have just found this place in the middle of nowhere that shows weird old movies on 35 on a giant screen. They're drawn to it. It's really pretty heartening because I was there when it was just a handful of cars, and they were going to maybe run the movie for just me some nights.
Yeah, and did.
Just one of our regulars is a filmmaker named Doug Buck who drives down every month from Montreal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's the future of film going and the theater experience. I really feel it is. It's going to be this community-based building these kind of independent air in these independent areas. It just feels like the showmanship and the care that goes into the curation. It's like night and day to renting a seat at your, local big box.
Sure. One thing Jeff and I talked about last week, I also think it's the care and the love and the passion you put into the specific night, but it also like endurance has a lot to do with it too. And I think the fact that like Jeff and I are still doing this after 13 years and are not slowing down, we have no intentions of slowing at all. But I think that that's like actually really important is longevity.
Like we have heard so many people off of the documentary or the podcast say like your guys go get 'em attitude, and the fact that it's panning out, like it just inspires me. It's why I love it. And it's such an added gift that you never think about when you're doing it. But just like you guys inspiring us with the amazing films that you're able to get a hold of, it's like tenfold across the map. I feel like we're all lifting each other up.
Yeah, longevity speaks volumes, especially in a town like New York City. New York City, it changes so much. Like the evolution, I mean, you literally blink an eye and an entire block is totally different than it was 2 months ago. And I think there's something to be said for when you plant your roots here and you really stick it out and you stay for a really long time. Jeff is approaching 40 years in New York. I just had my 25th anniversary in New York. And the city changes really, really fast, but the people don't. And the people who stick it out and stick around and stick to whatever it is they do, I think that, like, I don't know, Jeff and I and the Deuce, it's like we mean something. We just, this is a great story. So Jeff and I worked at Film Forum, as we mentioned, and they have a kids series on Sundays at 11 a.m. called Film Forum Junior. And this family started bringing their little boy named Shane when he was 8 years old, and his little sister Matilda when she was like 4 years old.
Yeah.
And now Shane is 20 or 21, and Matilda is, 17, and they're coming to the Deuce now.
Amazing. Just that carryover, like that inspiration that you've given them, and they've taken that into their adult life. And I always say it, just like the drive-in and 35 millimeter experience, if it weren't for people like us, it would be a dead medium. And we feel a responsibility to shout as hard and loud as we can about it and let people know why that's so important and the importance of what you guys are doing. Like you're shining a light on this insanely potent piece of theatrical history. And without that, it's left to the discovery in books and documentaries. You guys are actively keeping this alive.
Thank you. It's all about perspective too. I mean, one of my favorite things to do when I'm doing intros is to create context and perspective. I'm obsessed with inflation, so I love like saying like 1920s dollars versus 2025 dollars. But a theater like the Harris, it closed in '96. I don't know, off the top of my head, maybe it opened in like 1908. Let's just say it opened in 1908, 1911, somewhere around there. You know, that's an 80-year history and a 90-year history. And to kind of put that into perspective, I always say, hey guys, listen, the room we're sitting in right now, I guarantee you, 80 years from now, there is not going to be 100 people watching a movie in this room.
It puts it all into perspective, you know?
I mean, I've been doing it for 56 years. I don't know. Maybe,
yeah.
Maybe it will. Who knows? I don't know.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Odds are stacked against all of us that Nitehawk will still be there as long as the Harris was running movies, you know?
The invisible barrier between good and evil. Equinox. The weird, the occult, the supernatural, before your very eyes. As 4 teenage boys and girls challenge a devil cult, fight a fearsome prehistoric monster to save their lives, their sanity, their immortal souls. Equinox. In supernatural color.
Well, what do you think, Mark? Should we talk a little Equinox?
Yeah, I mean, we can entice people to be really sad that they didn't get a ticket.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry.
They should show up anyway.
Yeah.
If it's convenient, because you never know when a ticket's going to open up.
This is true.
It often happens.
It's all about the hang, you know? Like, come and powwow it with us.
What can you guys tell us about Equinox that you don't want to just save for the beginning of the show that night?
To be honest, I haven't even really started my deep dive into the history of Equinox. So I could tell you a few fun facts that I'm sure I will mention at the intro.
The one thing I always remember about Equinox, and I've had a chance to see it a couple times on film, is that Frank Bonner from WKRP in Cincinnati, isn't it? That's what always sticks out in the movie to me. Like, it's Herb.
One of the reasons I was excited to get it on the schedule was this often happens when a lot of things come to me the same way. It's doing research for another movie that we're showing, looking at ads, blah, blah, blah. And then I see a giant paid, half-page ad for Equinox. And I'm like, how the hell does this movie get a giant ad for this like rinky-dink kind of movie? I was just really surprised to see. I was like, okay, played, we're going to show it. It's an inspiring movie to me. I've never seen it in a theater. I haven't seen it in 20 years probably. But when I saw it back then, it was one of those movies where it gives you the feeling you could make your own movie. Like, oh yeah, this is doable in a way.
It's a good movie to collaborate with Mahoning on. It began its life in the drive-in. So the earliest listings I have for Equinox are mid-August, August 12th, 1970. And it started a whole drive-in tour in the South and then eventually moved up to the Northeast. The first listing I had was the Twin Air Drive-In in Pensacola, Florida. And it was produced by Jack H. Harris, who was born in 1918. He was a really interesting guy. He started his career at the age of 6 in vaudeville. So that would have been, 1924? And he went on to become a theater usher, a theater manager, and a projectionist until he became a producer of movies. His first movie was The Blob. And this is also kind of a perfect title because it goes back to what I was saying before about how it toured and the films that it played with. Its first iteration in the drive-in, it was a triple feature. It played with something called Master of Horror, which was the new name given to an Argentinian Edgar Allan Poe anthology film. And I'm going to butcher this title, Obras Maestras del Terror from 1960, which Jack H. Harris picked up, repurposed, and shipped out with Equinox, 1970, 10 years later. The other feature was Master of Terror, aka 4D Man, which was a Universal release from 1959 that Jack H. Harris also produced, repurposed as Master of Terror. So And a couple drive-ins in the South were screening it with The Blob, which was an early feature that he produced. So
interestingly enough, we just did a road show last week at the Colonial Theater in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, which was where the movie theater scenes in The Blob were shot.
Yep.
Oh,
great theater. I was just there. I was just there for the first time in the fall for the Exhumed Films 24-hour.
Oh, I was there too. Yeah.
Fest. Yeah, amazing. So Equinox is it's a great title because it has a drive-in history. We've come across this a lot, Jeff and I, where a title, now everything opens in New York first, then LA a week later, and then it goes wide, quote unquote, if it hasn't streamed first, right? But back then in the 60s and 70s, titles like this would quite literally roadshow at Southern drive-ins months before it would find itself on the Deuce. And the Equinox opened on the Deuce December 9th, 1970 at the Empire Theater. As I mentioned earlier, B-pick The War of the Gargantuas, which was a Japanese horror movie repurposed and redubbed for American release.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And that's what I think people are really going to love about this podcast. It's so rich with history. You guys are so inspiring. You could tell the passion just lives in your souls, I know you said you're not social media or pre-social media guys, but do you have any means for people to follow and support you? Website, socials, whatever?
Yeah. I mean, we have an Instagram page called @the Deuce Film Series. We have facebook.com/the Deuce Film Series. Yeah. Jeff and I are not as prolific as we should be on either of those sites because, I kind of loathe social media.
I used to kill it on the Facebook thing.
We did pre-COVID. Yeah, pre-COVID, we were a lot better pre-COVID on Facebook. I'm a little better post-COVID on Instagram, but we're live guys. We don't really do too much.
But the Nitehawk website is a great place to go because they'll list all your shows as you announce them and really great descriptions and the poster and all that.
Jeff writes all the copy. It's brilliant copy. It's hilarious. I encourage everyone to actually read the copy.
Does anybody read that?
I hope they. I do.
Ours. I think
I do. Because I have to copy edit it like crazy. But no offense. But it's really funny. And I just watched the trailer for Beyond the Valley of the Super Vixens, which may or may not have been written by Roger Ebert. The trailer.
The verbiage, the narration in the Meyer films is brilliant and insane, and his trailers are works of art on their own, with their own unique narration and editing, and they're insane.
Well, Jeff is absolutely the reincarnate of whoever was writing the narration for Russ Meyer trailers because his copy reads just like a Russ Meyer trailer. It was like a brilliant little moment that I had connecting those dots. Tons of alliteration.
A mouthful.
I try to go on the longest alliterative runs that I can to the point of obnoxiousness, and it's a personal challenge.
It's all part of the flair and showmanship. I'm telling you, it's beautiful.
We do have one more question that I can't leave out because we ask it of everybody. For each of you, if you could program a night or a weekend, so that would be one or two double features at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, regardless of the financial ruin that might ensue based on your choices, what would you play?
All right, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to say Jeff curates for the both of us. So Jeff curates for the Deuce. So he's going to curate the weekend at the Mahoning Drive-In. And real quick, are we talking a holiday weekend? Are we talking 3 nights, 3 films, 9 films total? We
are talking whatever would make your drive-in dream come true.
Take it away, Jeff.
I want to do a Claudia Jennings double feature of 2 good Deuces that we did, Unholy Rollers and Gator Bait. Gator Bait, which I don't think we could find a New York play date for it. There was no information out there, so...
Tons of drive-in dates for that.
Yeah, I imagined that as a drive-in movie. Unholy Rollers.
Home run.
For that, at the Deuce, not just at the Deuce, on me, on my arm, for all of my life, is her tattoo that Claudia Jennings gets in the movie, Unholy Rollers. The team logo, Avengers team logo of the skate with the knife through it, that she gets on the boardwalk. There's a sign that says tattoos while you wait, which doesn't make any sense because how else are you going to get a tattoo?
You give me the tattoo, I'll be back in a half hour.
So yeah, I got the tattoo for Unholy Rollers, and then we made
Temporary tattoos
temporary
for
tattoos
everyone in the crowd.
for the audience. Everybody had the Unholy Rollers. So yeah, the Claudia Jennings double feature would be a big one for me. Maniacs Are Loose, aka the Thrill Killers, the Steckler movie, which he did roadshow around and had maniacs loose during the movie, attacking people, which would be really fun to do. So I had another double feature of to bring back my childhood of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, maybe team it with Pink Floyd and Live in Pompeii.
Wow. Yeah.
Intense. I wanted to bring back the thrill of driving from Norfolk to Virginia Beach and seeing
giant tits over the highway.
The one Russ Meyer movie so that you could see it from the next county. I got it.
the Norfolk Drive-In, TNA Toll Road Drive-In experience.
Oh, no.
With candy striped nurses and swinging cheerleaders.
Sold.
Both with actresses that are really good. What else did I have? Oh, Death Riders, a documentary about everybody that sees Death Riders. We've shown it at Movie Friends a couple of times now. Everybody that sees it. It's about this troupe of traveling youngsters who are daredevils. They do things like climb into a wooden box casket that has dynamite in it, and they blow themselves up.
Yeah.
They do a lot. There's a lot of bike tricks, and I believe Laszlo Kovacs shot it. It's beautiful. Yeah.
1976.
Perfect.
With another fun for the whole family off-road racing, etc. This movie Dirt, which I would like to get for the Deuce sometime. And those would be good together.
Yeah.
I believe Dirt is described as being, quote, viewers will enjoy the gregarious narration, the vibrant momentum, and will walk away at the end thinking, quote, those folks really had some good old-fashioned fun.
Yeah. Take that to the
Isn't that how you want people to? That's how you want people to
yeah.
leave.
That's how we want people to leave the drive-in on any night.
Right? And it's all like, and they'll be ready to like rev their engines. They'll get them really ready to go. Viewer friendly for families. That's how it's described.
Nice.
Bring the family. I like anything you could bring the family to. Oh, Cage T and Crazy Mama would be also.
Yes.
Cage T, which we did very excitingly with Demi at the Deuce.
Wow.
That was a fun night. We did it was July 2016. We finally booked Caged Heat. That was one of those that it took a while to book. Jonathan Demme decided to come. He hadn't screened the movie in decades. And I don't know, just the magic of the Nitehawk Cinema and the people that were working there at the time convinced him to come with his lovely wife. And he told me that he would do a sit-down conversation with me, but that he wanted it to be before the film in case he got tired or bored and wanted to leave. He didn't want to stay after the movie. The Deuce is late. It starts at 9:30. We're not done and wrapped up by 11:30 or midnight. So the challenge for me, I'd moderated a ton of Q&As with special guests before, but I'd never done a pre-film Q&A, a pre-film conversation. And I actually do like that format. So my thought was like, oh shit, like how am I going to do this? And he had just released what ended up being his final film, a concert film from Justin Timberlake concert. So I was like, well, let's start with the most recent film and then work backwards to his first film. So I had to like really structure the conversation and the narrative arc of the conversation and all the slides and multimedia that I incorporated with this like hour-long conversation with Jonathan Demme, moving backwards in time. And it worked out beautifully, where it was like a career retrospective, rewind, start from where we're at, go all the way back to the very first film, and then just hit the first film. And he ended up having such a great time that he stayed for the after party until like 2 a.m. and talked to everyone. And it ended up being his last public appearance before he passed away.
Amazing. Wow.
We have it on video. We have yet to edit and release it. But
and there's a very nice picture of the Deuce people with Jonathan Demme, which I am not present in. because at some point Joe comes to me during Caged Heat and is like, "We're taking pictures with Demi. Come out." And I'm like, "They're about to bust back into the prison. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving the movie. I've been waiting years to watch this. I'm not." So I missed the photo opportunity.
Jeff missed his chance to get a photo with Jonathan Demme months before Demme passed away because he didn't want to miss Caged Heat.
That's dedication.
I was. There's going to be that freeze frame where everything comes home.
You live this. That's what I love. Like it's just in your soul.
Before we started, we were all sitting in the bar talking, and I don't even know how it came up out of nowhere. I had nothing to do with this coming up. He kind of out of nowhere asks if anybody's seen Idaho Transfer, which was one of my favorite movies.
Yeah,
that I've been trying to get shown forever, and I felt very just that I was right. Jonathan Demme likes Idaho Transfer.
Well, you guys are incredible. We could talk for hours. Like, we'll have to have you guys back on, and we'll have to connect. Obviously, we're planning on coming back to the Nitehawk regularly for the road show, but we'll have to put our heads together and see how we can take this relationship to the next level.
We're gonna have fun on March
20th. It's on the spring equinox. The Deuce is the second Thursday of every month, unless for some special reason we need to be on the third Thursday of the month. So we're showing Equinox on the spring equinox, March 20th.
I'm sure people are going to come out and have a great time with us. Again, if you didn't get tickets, we apologize, but stay tuned to the Nitehawk website. Give the boys a follow. On that note, Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field, and most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night and God bless you.